Ryan Chen didn't consider himself an impulse buyer. He tracked his budget on a spreadsheet. He drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic he'd paid off 2 years ago. He meal prepped on Sundays. By any reasonable definition, he was financially deliberate, which made what happened on a Tuesday morning in September all the more interesting. Ryan had been using the same iPhone for 2.5 years. It did everything he needed: calls, texts, maps, podcast app, banking. He hadn't thought about his phone in months. It was invisible in the best possible way. The way a hammer is invisible when it just does its job. Then, out of idle curiosity, he watched the Apple event live stream on his lunch break. He wasn't in the market. He had no intention of buying anything. He just watched. 45 minutes later, Ryan looked down at his phone, the exact same phone he'd been happily using that very morning, and something had shifted, not in the phone. In him. The phone suddenly felt dated, a little slow, a little embarrassing to pull out in a meeting. Nothing about it had changed. But his experience of it had been quietly, systematically dismantled. 3 weeks later, he was on Apple.com, configuring a new model. Ryan is not unusual. Ryan is the intended outcome. What happened to him on that Tuesday, that transition from satisfaction to low-grade shame in under an hour, is not a side effect of great marketing. It is the product. The actual product that Apple and every other major tech company sells isn't hardware. It's a feeling. And more specifically, it's the removal of a feeling of inadequacy that they created in the first place. I'm going to show you exactly how that machine works, the psychological architecture, the business mechanics, and the financial cost that most people never actually add up across a lifetime. My name is Ryan, same name as our guy in the story, which I always find a little uncomfortable to say out loud. And I've spent the last several years reporting on consumer psychology and technology spending habits. This video is about one specific idea, that the upgrade cycle is not driven by innovation. It is driven by the deliberate, systematic manufacturing of dissatisfaction. And when you see the full picture, the neuroscience, the business model, all the lifetime math, you're going to feel genuinely different about the next product announcement you watch. I want to be upfront about one thing before we go further. This video is not anti-technology. I'm not going to tell you to throw your phone in a river or live off the grid. I use a smartphone. I own a laptop. Technology is genuinely useful. The argument isn't against new tech. The argument is against the psychological infrastructure designed to make you replace working technology on a timeline that benefits manufacturers, not you. Stay with me through this. The final section on lifetime compounding is the part that actually changes behavior. The most valuable thing your phone manufacturer sells isn't the phone, it's your dissatisfaction with the phone you already own. And they've built a billion-dollar infrastructure to deliver that dissatisfaction on a predictable schedule. Here's the core tension at the center of modern consumer technology. The hardware has gotten good enough that real, felt improvements between generations are increasingly marginal, but the business model of every major hardware company depends on you replacing your device every 2 to 3 years. When those two facts collide, something has to give. In its place, something more sophisticated gets deployed. The engineering of desire through the engineering of inadequacy. Let's ground this in what we can actually verify. According to data cited by Statista and industry analysts, the average smartphone replacement cycle in the United States was approximately 3 to 3.5 years as of the early 2020s. That's meaningful context. Even at 3 years, most premium smartphones are engineered to remain functional and well-supported for 5 to 6 years. which means the average American is replacing hardware roughly twice as often as functional necessity would require on pricing. The Consumer Intelligence Research Partners has consistently reported that the average selling price of smartphones in the U.S. crossed $800 and has trended toward $900 in recent years. With flagship models routinely exceeding $1,000, on household spending, the Consumer Technology Association publishes annual estimates of U.S. household consumer electronic spending. Their figures have typically ranged between $1,500 and $1,800 per year per household. Those are the verified anchors. I want to be careful here. I'm not going to give you a suspiciously precise lifetime number. I will walk you through the math transparently so you can run your own version of it. Here's what the data tells us plainly. Americans are replacing devices significantly earlier than functional necessity required at price points that have risen substantially. The upgrade cycle is a major personal finance pattern, and one that almost nobody has actually quantified over a lifetime. Here is where the content about tech upgrades usually focuses planned obsolescence through software, and it's worth going deeper than the standard explanation. The documented version. In 2017, Apple acknowledged that iOS updates included power management features that throttled processor speed on older iPhone models with degraded batteries. The effect that Apple faced class action lawsuits and eventually reached a settlement, reported at over $500 million, was that users experienced performance degradation that correlated with new model releases. But the subtler, more persistent version is what I'd call operating system drift. Every major iOS or Android release is developed and tested primarily on current generation hardware. Animation stutter. Background app refresh is more aggressive. Battery drain increases. The phone is technically supported, but it's carrying a load that makes it feel older than it is. This is not necessarily malicious. Some of it is genuinely the byproduct of building software for current hardware. But the consumer experience is identical to planned obsolescence. Regardless of intent, the repair economics of modern devices are, if you look at them clearly, a masterclass in limiting the alternatives to replacement. Consider batteries, the single most common driver of the "my phone feels old" experience. Lithium-ion batteries degrade meaningfully after 500 to 800 full charge cycles, which for most users translates to 2 to 3 years of use, but manufacturers have spent the last decade making that solution progressively harder to access. Batteries are glued rather than screwed. Screens are bonded in ways that require specialized equipment to separate. The right to repair movement exists specifically because this pattern has become systemic enough to attract legislation in multiple U.S. states. States, including California and Colorado, have passed right to repair laws. The consumer calculus this creates. When faced with a $100 repair, quote, on a 3-year-old device and a trade-in offer, a significant portion of consumers choose to replace rather than repair. The math is being done for them. This is the mechanism I think is least understood, and the one that explains why even financially careful people like Ryan end up at Apple.com. The annual product launch event September for Apple is not primarily a product announcement. It is a precision instrument for shifting your reference point. Reference point theory in behavioral economics describes how we evaluate options not in absolute terms, but relative to a comparison point. Your satisfaction with your current phone isn't fixed. It's relative to what you're comparing it to. Before the launch event, you're comparing your phone to your memory of phones. After the launch event, you're comparing it to a device you just watched perform on a perfectly lit stage with professional cinematography. But what makes the annual cycle particularly effective is that the reference point shift doesn't require you to watch the event The weeks following a major launch involve an orchestrated wave of secondary content. Your feeds become a sustained, low-grade signal that your current device belongs to last year. Social psychologists call this descriptive norm signaling. The strongest version of the argument against everything I've just said goes something like this. But the new devices are actually better. The cameras genuinely do take better photos. That's a fair point. And I want to take it seriously rather than dismiss it. Yes, each new generation of flagship smartphones represents real engineering progress, but better as a technical fact and better in a way you can experience in daily use are different claims, and this is where the research is pretty clear. A study published in the journal Computers in Human Behavior examined how users perceived smartphone performance across generations. In realistic usage contexts, they could not reliably identify performance advantages in newer models. The gains between a well-maintained 2021 flagship and a 2024 flagship for 95% of tasks are real but effectively imperceptible in normal operation. So what are you actually paying for when you upgrade? In large part, you're paying for the restoration of the satisfaction you had before the reference point shift. That's an expensive way to resolve a discomfort that was artificially created. I'm going to walk through this carefully, because I think imprecise lifetime numbers do more harm than good. So, I'm going to be transparent about the assumptions. Average U.S. Smartphone selling price, approximately $850 to $900 in recent years. I'll use $875 as a midpoint. Average smartphone replacement cycle, approximately 3 years. Average household consumer electronics spending, approximately $1,500 to $1,800 per year. Person A follows the standard cycle. New premium smartphone every 3 years at $900. A new laptop every 4 years at $1,100. Earbuds every 2 years. Smartwatch every 3 years. Total, roughly $1,200 per year. Person B follows a sufficiency-first approach. Keeps smartphone 5 years with 1 battery replacement. Buys certified, refurbished. Keeps laptop 6 years. Annual average, $400 to $500. The annual gap between these two approaches, approximately $700 to $800. Over a 30-year adult earning life. The direct spending difference is approximately $21,000 to $24,000. The more significant number is the opportunity cost. The $700 to $800 annual difference, invested each year at roughly 7% real return, compounds to approximately $70,000 to $80,000 over 30 years. I want to be explicit that this is a model, not a prophecy. Returns vary. Assumptions may not hold. But the order of magnitude is what matters. There's a dimension to this conversation that rarely gets enough attention in personal finance content. And it matters. The environmental accounting. Life cycle analyses of smartphones consistently find that between 70 and 85% of a smartphone's total carbon footprint is generated during manufacturing, not during use. Every year, you keep a phone that works. You're deferring the full manufacturing carbon cost of its replacement. A device used for 5 years instead of 3 effectively reduces the annualized carbon impact by close to 40%. The UN Environment Program has tracked global e-waste volumes for years. Their data shows the total exceeded 50 million metric tons annually by the late 2010s and has continued to grow. The person holding a 4-year-old phone isn't just making a sound financial decision, they're making a more defensible environmental one. Change the comparison point from what's new to what's sustainable, and the person with the older phone is ahead. Let me name the deepest mechanism at work, because I think it's the one that most articles about tech spending never quite reach. The upgrade illusion works not because it's logically persuasive. It works because it plugs into something much older than consumer capitalism. Our sensitivity to social position and relative standing. The philosopher René Girard described what he called mimetic desire, the idea that we want things not primarily because of their intrinsic value to us, but because we observe others wanting them. Desire is fundamentally imitative. Modern product launch culture has weaponized mimetic desire. When you watch a launch event, you're watching a choreographed performance of desire, a room full of people visibly excited, a cascade of social media posts. You absorb that desire. You feel it as your own. And then you look at your current device through the lens of that absorbed desire, and it comes up short. This is why just knowing the facts is not sufficient as a solution. The intervention that actually works is not information-based. It's identity-based. Conduct a genuine sufficiency audit of your current devices. Write down the 10 things you actually use each device for. Then ask honestly whether your current device handles those 10 things well. If the answer is genuinely no, if there's a real task you can't do, then you have an actual reason to upgrade. That's the standard. Not something newer exists. Separate maintenance from replacement. The single most common driver of my phone feels old is battery degradation. Apple's official battery replacement program runs $99. An $80 to $100 fix has a very different math than a $1,000 upgrade. REFRAME, refurbished as a rational arbitrage, not a compromise. Apple's certified refurbished program, Samsung's certified pre-owned program, and back market sell grade A devices at 30 to 50% below new retail. Build a personal upgrade policy with hard criteria and write it down before the next launch event. You will upgrade when your device cannot run required software, when battery replacement no longer works, or when repair cost exceeds 50% of replacement cost, not when a new model is announced. Not when your carrier sends a promotional email. Not when your reference point gets shifted by a 45-minute stage show. Your criteria. Applied in advance. Let's come back to Ryan. 3 weeks after that September lunch break, he ordered a new phone. The trade-in value softened the sticker. Monthly financing spread the rest into a number small enough not to hurt. By the time the new device arrived, the unboxing felt good. The setup felt fresh. For about a week, he was genuinely happy with it. Then the phone became invisible again, the same way the old one had been. Just a tool that did its job. Except now he was 24 months into a payment plan. 6 months later, he found the old phone in a drawer while looking for something else. He turned it on. It was fine. Fast. Actually, good camera. Every app he used every day. He held both phones at once and genuinely could not articulate what his daily experience of the new one offered that the old one hadn't. Ryan is thoughtful. He tracks his spending, but the upgrade illusion didn't target his irrationality. It targeted his humanity, his sensitivity to social comparison, his desire to feel current and capable. That's a harder target to defend than irrationality. The defense isn't cynicism about technology. It's clarity about yourself. Your 2-year-old phone is not behind. You have been told it's behind by a system that makes money every time you believe that. The most financially and environmentally rational thing you can do with a working device is keep using it. Use what works. Fix what breaks. Invest the difference. If this reframed how you think about the next upgrade decision, hit the like button. It helps this kind of content reach people who are in the middle of configuring something on apple.com right now. Subscribe if you want more of this. The psychology and economics of everyday financial decisions that quietly compound into the numbers that determine how much freedom you have later. Drop a comment. What device are you currently holding on to? And how long have you had it? I'm genuinely curious, and I read every single one. See you in the next one.